I met Noah Schrock, and at that conference, the 1963 conference, why Leo got a call from Noah Schrock that he needed a ride down to Kiowa, Kansas. And he asked Leo, he said, I'd like to have you come along with me. Because Leo was just rising in the ministry there, and Noah was looking for help, and he knew who he wanted, you know what I mean. But Noah was a big man, and he always had to take the front seat because he was a good 6 foot tall and a pretty good sized man. Well, when I was sitting, Leo and him were discussing the conference at Tremont. And they were talking about this orphanage. And I said something to Noah. I said, Noah, what about a handicapped home? He looked at me and said, handicapped, yeah. He said, you know what? We got 3 of them. And them people are all struggling in Oakville and on a place to go. Noah, he said, well, this has merit. He said, this has merit. So he took, and he said, okay. He said, you get you 2 brothers, you get things lined up. And he said, I'll see that you get 15 minutes at the Rittman conference to give a report on this. So we right away set up, and we give us permission to write to every church elder that had on their churches how many handicapped children are in your presence. And we had a date of what we needed to answer. If we didn't get an answer, we called them. But we got it. And if I remember right, there was 133 handicapped children in the Apostolic Christian Church, or handicapped people. I want to say people, not children. 133 handicapped people in the church.
Later, Bob did some research, and there was some, if you took any group of people, 2% of them would have a handicapped child. Like if you took a group of doctors, 2% of them would have a handicapped child. And when we took the account of the number of people that were members of the AC Church, there would have been 2% of them that would have had a handicapped child.
They did find out there was a need for this kind of person to have help. And they were getting to the age, just like Marlene, they needed a place for them. And so that's why I think then they could see that. So they formed a committee to make out the building and everything.
We were asking for, I think, over $1 million, $35 a month. I think it was either 3 or 5 years per family of members. This was the members, but friends were sure welcome, because we would take friends or anything affiliated with the Apostolic Christian Church.
I don't think the home would be where it is today had it not been for the volunteers and the donations, the funds. The state funds would not reach, and there is no way we could have survived had it not been for those donations and of its wonderful volunteers. I can't say enough about that.
Well, I was part of it when there was no nothing.
Yep.
You know,
Talking about it.
not even a committee or you know, it was just now who started it the way first. I seem to think it was more Harold Krantz and
Al Unsicker?
Unsicker, that could be.
yeah, and it kind of started very, very small, and then it grew before to then meeting a little more, you know, how it's...
They said, look, we have attended a lot of these types of meetings, and we will tell you one thing, you are going to fail. But he said, you've been so dead earnest in trying and so fervent that we're going to issue you a permit. It was just out of the goodness of the love of God that showed the value it manifested itself right there.
We were praying for the success of the home, and finally our oldest daughter said, "Dad, you ought to apply for that job." And Bob said, "Oh, well, honey, they don't want a farmer." And as time went on, Bob began to be really bothered that he should apply for that job. And my heart kind of sank because I was happy where I was at on the farm with our family, and Kent was happy. He had all kinds of pets that he loved. I was happy where I was at, and I kind of had this strange feeling in my gut that I was going to move to Morton. I really had to pray hard about it. Okay, if this is going to be, as time went on, Bob just couldn't shake that feeling that he should apply. And he finally told me, he said, "I'm going to apply, and if I get it, fine. If I don't, that's fine too. I'm just going to let the Lord decide." The board had hired Bob, the director of nursing. Marion Wigan was hired for the secretary's job. Vi Funk was the activities, and Edna Klein was the dietary. There were 5 staff members. They decided to take in 2 residents and then wait until they were adjusted and the staff was adjusted, and then add on more residents as time went on. So he had more staff than residents, but there was a great deal of work to be done. The interior decorator was not done yet. There was furniture to be moved in. There was odds and ends of carpenter things. That the office wasn't finished yet, and the floors were laid, but there was finishing that needed to be done. So Bob and Marion came to our house, and they set up an office in our dining room. We had a typewriter, a card table, a file cabinet, and a purchasing order pad, and that's how the home started.
Bob he had one wonderful attribute. He was willing to listen, and he would, okay, how would you handle it, or this or that?
I can't say enough about the staff. We had more staff than residents, and there were many things that needed to be done before we could operate full. So Edna Klein, who was the cook at that time, volunteered to water the landscaping, which was huge. The aides, when the residents would sleep, did the laundry. It was a wonderful team effort. Bob was the administrator and the maintenance man, the social worker. He helped the aides occasionally, and it turned out to be a blessing in disguise because he had more empathy for each department. He knew the good and the bad. And the departments, there was a camaraderie there of helping each other, and that too was a blessing. The Lord just sent the right people for the staff, and He's continued to do that.
I'm not sure I can give you specifics, but I have said many times that it's been a tremendous blessing to be this close and to have the home here and have our involvement with the Morton Church.
Well, Morton was the only town that had a major medical facility. And Morton was a big enough a town around there that we could, and Morton didn't know it, but we could get 40 acres of land that was available. And of course, everybody said, you know, you fellas you're never going to get your money, you're going to do this kind of thing. Well, our thinking was a little further out than that. Our thinking was, Morton needs a new church, because at that time they couldn't even have a funeral with a casket in the assembly, and it had to go down the basement. And all that had so many things. And Morton's going to want a fellowship hall too, like the rest of them. And we had good support from the Morton elders out there.
These are people who had no choice. God put them here for a purpose. We don't exactly know why, but they're here. They're our people. They're special people, and we want to support them.
Finally, the building was finished, and it was a beautiful place. We had a fireplace. We had a beautiful pond out in the courtyard. We had the biblical gardens. We had the bathrooms with tubs, and it was like a very nice hotel. The building was beautiful, and the idea was to make a excellent setting for the people that would live there.
While I was at ISU, it was in 1971, the home for the handicapped was built. It didn't have anybody in occupancy yet, and so Phil Mogler called me and asked me if I wanted a tour. I said sure, and so it was what is basically the north part of the building now, as you well know, and it was up to date as browns, rusts, olive-colored greens, and wallpaper and gold glittery chandelier stuff.
I remember attending the open house with my family and just I was already a part of the church, and just being really excited that our church was doing this, because I'd been in special ed enough that I was starting to develop a career and saw the need in this area, probably the whole nation, but especially in central Illinois, that we really needed. There was really not hardly anything provided for adult services.
The first day that Mom and Dad came down to check it out, they told them that Marlene couldn't be here. I don't know if I said that. Anyway, that Marlene couldn't be here because everybody that came in had to walk in. And Dad said, well, she can't walk in. So he went home, and the board member asked him how to go, and he said, well, they can't take Marlene. And he said, why? And he said, well, they're supposed to walk in. And he said, well, we'll see about that. And he got it changed, and she was in.
But the first two, the Lord sent the right two people. The one was an older man who was physically able but needed supervision. The other one was a young girl who, her parents were elderly, and she was next thing to infant care. And the Lord opened the way, and they were admitted. Bob was so thankful. In the spectrum of physical care or health care, they couldn't have been further apart. So that made it possible for anybody, any handicapped person, to come and apply. And that too was the work of the Lord.
Well, I guess I started on the ground floor. They were making a survey among all the churches to determine whether or not the Brotherhood would support such a venture. And Noah Schrock got a letter one day about the survey, and he walks over to me and he hands it to me and he says, you take care of this. So that was my first involvement with the Home for the Handicapped. And we go ahead and did the survey, and they did make the decision then to go ahead and build the first 50 units. So that was where I began as a representative. I didn't realize it at the time, but when I turned the representative's job over to Chuck Massner, I had spent 33 years working for the Home for the Handicapped, so that's was my involvement.
The original board, I'm not sure how many years they continued before they started one a year retiring and having a replacement. As I recall, Brother Hartzell Schmidgall was the first replacement, and then a year later I was the second replacement. So that's where I got really fully involved in the home.
I think God himself sent the staff there. And when Bob retired, he said, God helped us, and as long as God is the head of the home, it'll be fine. And so he retired very confident that those that came after would be blessed as he was.
God had actually given me, along with a lot of other people, the opportunity to live Matthew 25:40. And, if you do to the least of these, and is it the least? I don't even know if that's the right way to communicate that, but people who have needs different than yours. But the give and it shall be given to you, pressed down and running over, is certainly true.
I know one of the estate inspectors one time said to Bob, I see some camaraderie here that I don't often see in homes. What is it? What creates this camaraderie? And Bob said, well, I think it's the residents. We love them. You can't help but relax and be yourself. You don't have to put on any airs. You just be yourself and love them.
I still admire very much how much families and staff work together and try to individualize what people really need.
People really started being trained right up front about all people have the ability to grow and change, even in small steps. Everyone has a right. They have rights. They don't earn them. Look for the least restrictive setting. Normalization was a word that was used at that time too. Community access, inclusion, choice. All of those things became more and more not only cognizant but more pronounced in terms of the changes that I saw over the time.
There were hurdles. Like every project, I think that a group takes over. But I think I can only say the Lord did wonderful things that we could not have done. He worked in their hearts. The dedication of the staff was unbelievable. And the love that they showed the residents. Those are the big things that I remember as being huge. And it's just the love of the Lord in people's hearts.
I thoroughly enjoyed the board meetings and the other board members. It was like I mentioned before, like a family, and we all had the same desires, and that is to provide services the best we could to enable the people who were residents to live as normal a life as possible.
I only know that Romans 8:28 is true. All things work together for good to those that love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. And there's a purpose for every family that has a handicapped child, and you follow that, and I just know that it's true.
I remember Sunday school specific, when they started them, the answer was always Jesus. They'd ask a question, what's the answer? Jesus, Jesus. Well, that's pretty simple. I thought we could sure learn a lot from them people. That's the answer.
I feel like everything God had a hand in it. I mean, we were so thankful. I mean, and it was so special. I mean, even the setting. It's such a beautiful setting right away. It just, everybody worked at it. Everybody worked together. I mean, just from the beginning. Because, I mean, I've been involved a lot, because I ended up being her guardian then. And all her meetings and everything. Everybody just, it's just been all from God, really. That's all I can say. God was in all of it.
Keep up the good work.
Yeah,
We
that's
appreciate it.
I just keep going back to the Bob Knobloch early on, the Psalm 127, one thing, unless the Lord build a house, it's not going to stand. Well, hey, we're here to say he did. He did build this house. Not in a proud way, but it is factual. Look at the tree that's grown.
When I think of how we started and how the home is now, I am just so in awe of what the Lord has done, and it was not us, it was the Lord. It couldn't have been otherwise.